Good afternoon. My name is Una Kelly and I'm the Marketing Manager in UCD Sutherland School of Law. Thanks for taking the time out to join us on what is certainly in Dublin, a lovely sunny day. Today we are discussing the Master's programmes offered by the School of Law in UCD. We're recording today's webinar and it will be available on our YouTube channel in due course. We're delighted to be joined by three graduates of our Master's programmes. Andrew McKeown from the Masters in Common Law, Claire Buckley from the LLM in Criminology and Criminal Justice, and David Cochrane from the LLM in Intellectual Property and Information Technology. My colleague in the School of Law, Niamh McCabe, is also a panel member today. Niamh is the Graduate Programme Manager and will be able to answer a lot of questions you may have about studying a Master's with us. So for this webinar, the format will be as follows. Our three guest speakers will talk about the master's degree that they studied and then the implication that this qualification has had on their careers. After Andrew, Claire and David have spoken, Niamh will join them on a panel to answer any questions. Throughout the talks, I would encourage you to type in any questions you have in the Q&A function. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. And I will endeavour to ask the panellists all questions that I can within the time frame. We plan to finish by 10 to 1 or thereabouts, so if you have any questions that you would like to ask afterwards, please email lawpostgraduate@ucd.ie and we'll get back to you afterwards. You'll also find a lot of information on past webinars on the UCD Sutherland School of Law YouTube channel, which you'll find very easily with a Google search. So before I hand over to our speakers, I want to give you a brief overview about the school and the master's programs that we offer. So UCD Sutherland School of Law is a world-class educational institution ranked in the top 100 law schools in the world. We've the largest full-time professional law faculty in Ireland. Many of our academics are leading names in their fields of specialisation and are frequently called on as policy advisors by government bodies both in Ireland and internationally. We're based in a modern state-of-the-art law school building on the UCD campus. It's a lovely space and it lends itself to a strong feeling of community and collegiality amongst staff and students. So in terms of our master's programs, I just wanted to give you a few pointers that will be of interest. You can start your master's in either September or in January, with the exception of the Masters in Common Law. You can study part-time also over 2 years. This applies to the LLMs and the MSc in Criminology. Fees can be paid in 3 installments, usually in September, January and April. We offer 9 different masters, 6 LLMs, which are specifically relevant to law graduates, and for graduates from other disciplines, 2 MScs and the Masters in Common Law. If you're a law student interested in studying an LLM, you can either choose the LLM General or specialise with the LLM in International Human Rights, European Law and Public Affairs, International Commercial Law, Criminology and Criminal Justice. This is the Masters that Claire will speak about, and Intellectual Property and IT, which David will talk us through. I mentioned that we offer 2 MScs also. One of these is the MSc in International Law and Business, which is open to graduates from law, business, finance and economics. This is a great springboard for a career in professional services, management consultancy, business, and of course, law. We run the program in partnership with the Michael Smurfit Business School, and you can choose to study 2 of the 6 modules there. We also offer an MSc in Criminology and Criminal Justice for graduates from a non-law background. This is an excellent choice for someone interested in following a career in one of the criminal justice agencies, the prisons, probation, policing, the NGO sector, or indeed in academia. And finally, the Masters in Common Law is a 2-year full-time conversion degree open to graduates from disciplines other than law. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Andrew McKeown to speak about this programme. Andrew graduated with an honours degree in History and English in 2015 in UCD before enrolling for the MCL. He was the Swift MacNeill Scholar on entering the King's Inns, and he has since qualified as a barrister and lectures in law in both the King's Inns and TU Dublin. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Una, and I'm delighted to be welcomed back. So as Una said, I graduated from my undergrad in 2015, And so that's where I was. I was where you are now, for those of you who are interested in the MCL. I had never studied any law, never took any option modules, and I didn't have any lawyers in the family. It was something that came about over time as an interest. When I was at school, I didn't particularly have any interest in law, and it had been suggested by career guidance counselors that it might be a good decision for me. And I think I thought of law as grey suits in grey rooms, and probably not something that I would be interested in. And it was only through the course of my undergrad that I started to think about it. And upon entering the MCL, you are struck immediately with how much of an undertaking it is. It is a very intense degree. It is 4 years of a law degree in a very compact two, and that brings with it its own challenges. But more than that, it isn't just an undergrad that's been shortened. It's a master's degree, and perhaps I know something better about this now as a lecturer. It's marked as a master's degree. So while you're covering the same core material as undergrads are covering, you're marked at a different standard. The level of critical analysis that's required is at a greater level, and you're expected to know more breadth and depth of the law than you would be if you were in the undergraduate degree. But saying that, your lectures are shared with undergraduates. So you're in the large lecture halls. So there's a good sort of collegiate feel. You feel part of the campus, you feel part of the law school. And then you have your tutorials for your core modules with your lectures and just your MCL class itself. The MCL classes are small. So in my year, there was, I think, 23 in the year. And that's a very good sort of size space to have in a tutorial with the lecture. It means that you're going to know your lecturers probably much better than the average undergraduate would in any university. And that's always useful, not just for the MCL, but also going forward. And it's not to say that the tutorials that the undergrads get are bad because they are given by non-lecturers. I have delivered tutorials in UCD, so they're to a very high standard, but it sometimes is very helpful to have that personal relationship in a small class group with the lecturers themselves. Then a feature of the course is that it's a full-time degree. It's intensive, but the fact that it's full-time also kind of means you have a flavor of campus life. There's a lot of extracurricular activities that you can get involved with, and I would definitely recommend, if you do the MCL, that you get involved with those. If you're from UCD, you might already have gotten involved in things like debating, or if you're from other universities, you might have been involved there. But now that if you're thinking of becoming a law student, you can get involved in mooting, sort of in fake courts where you can argue cases one way or the other. That's great advocacy experience that, depending on whether you want to be a barrister or a solicitor or something else, is always a useful skill to have. There's the student legal service, and that's also a really useful endeavor to get involved in. And then there's the UCD Law Review. And the fact that it's full-time and you can get involved in these extracurricular materials, I think leads perhaps to a really well-rounded graduate at the end of it. I know, for instance, that there are certain roles that I have now alongside my law lecturing and my legal practice that I have specifically because of things that I got involved with in UCD. So, for example, I was a deputy editor of the UCD Law Review in my second year in the MCL. And then when I left King's Inns, I worked over the summer for Thomson Reuters, who are the publishers who produce most of the leading law textbooks. And I continue to edit a law journal that's published by Thomson Reuters. So by things that I was involved with at UCD, it has a real benefit to me now, as well as the great core legal understanding that the MCL provides. Then just generally as to prospects at the end of it, because while the MCL you might be interested in for the intellectual endeavor, the intellectual adventure, you probably want to know what are the job prospects at the end. So of my class of 23, there were 3 barristers. 2 of us practice at the bar, and then the third works in-house at Google. We have another barrister on the way. They are currently preparing for their entrance exams for the INS. So there have been 4 of us of the 23. We have a number of solicitors or trainee solicitors, and people took different routes. Some people went traveling afterwards. So we have some people who are already qualified as solicitors and barristers, and some who are still on the path. And we have solicitors north and south. So we have solicitors in Belfast, some in Dublin, I think some down the country. And then we have some of our class working over in London. They aren't actually doing a traineeship, but they work for a law firm. It isn't a paralegal role, but it's a sort of role that you'll only know about if you work in these firms. So there are a lot of job opportunities out there. And then perhaps the most unusual then of our group is that we have a diplomat. So we have someone who is a 3rd secretary out in Korea, representing Ireland out there. And all of us found the MCL to be incredibly useful. It really gives a great grounding in law. It gives really good life skills. And I think that a question that was previously asked at one of these talks that I saw a clip of was, are you as an MCL graduate as attractive as an LLB or a BCL graduate? And the answer to that is absolutely. And I think depending on your own circumstances and the things that you bring to the MCL, I think if I was an employer, I'd probably prefer an MCL graduate, because you have the experience from your previous degree, which is always useful no matter what it is. And then you're that bit older, that bit more mature when you're covering the law. And the law is probably fresher for you when you do your professional exams, which means perhaps the law is fresher for you when you do your traineeship or your deviling at the bar. So there's a lot of options open, whether you want to do academics, civil service, business, or legal practice. The MCL is a really solid degree that really provides you with a lot of choices going forward. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much for that, Andrew. I certainly found that absolutely fascinating, and I have learned a lot. I didn't realize all the different areas that your class had, or the different careers they're pursuing. So that's very interesting for us to know in the university. At this point, I'm going to call on our second speaker, who is Claire Buckley. She is actually joining us from Toronto, where she's a trainee lawyer. She graduated with a first-class honours degree in law and Irish from UCC before she undertook the LLM in criminology and criminal justice, and she'll be talking us through that today. Hello, Claire, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me today as well. As mentioned, I started off doing law and Irish in University College Cork. I had an interest maybe in studying law, seeing what it was like, but also didn't want to leave the Irish language behind. So I thought that was a nice combination. And then it was during my undergraduate that I really grew an interest in criminal law and criminology. So in first year, I had a criminal law module and I became interested in it. And then in my third year, I spent a year in Montana in the US, where I was able to attend law school. And I interned with 2 federal judges and then worked with the Montana Innocence Project. So that was really the time in my life where I knew that criminology, criminal justice was kind of the route that I wanted to go down. So then when I returned to Cork for my final year, that was kind of what was ticking over in my brain. I knew I didn't want to become a solicitor or barrister in Ireland straight away. So I thought that the LLM option was a really great idea. So then I was looking at different universities in Ireland and then some in Belgium, but I decided to go with UCD because the Institute of Criminology is located there. The lecturers are lovely. I actually worked with a firm in Dublin before, and I was speaking to someone there who had studied at UCD, and she was, mentioning all the professors by name and how lovely they were. So I decided to go with the LLM in criminology and criminal justice in UCD. Another reason is because the modules themselves sounded really interesting and quite specific. So I loved it when I went to UCD. It was great. I studied 3 modules per semester, and then a dissertation during the summer. So it was just 1 year. I think you can do it part-time as well. There was a girl in my class doing it part-time over 2 years, but I did it full-time for 1 year. And I really enjoyed it. The size of the class, as Andrew mentioned, it's smaller, so it's more interactive. I know one professor who would come in and we'd all sit in a circle and he'd pull up a random chair. You'd get to go in there, discuss everything. And it, again, compared to undergraduate modules where the classes are so large, it's great having that small interactive environment where you can really get into your teeth into the subjects. And then at the same time that they're not too small, that you can make friends in it. It's really great camaraderie. So then in terms of the modules that I studied, in the first semester, I studied advanced criminological theory, which looked at why people commit crime, different theories about that, and then different aspects of crime like gender or subcultures within crime. And then I also studied white collar crimes and looking at prosecuting them or defending them, things like whistleblowers, corruption within corporations, which was also really, really fascinating. And then as an LLM student, I took 1 law module, specifically law, not just sociology, in both semesters. So in the first semester, I chose asylum and refugee law, because again, it was something that I found really interesting. And we kind of looked at the definition in the Refugee Convention and the case law surrounding that. And then in the second semester, I studied international human rights law, looked at the different organs of the UN. And then for the criminology, criminal justice side, I studied coercive confinement, which was a really interesting topic, looking at mother and baby homes, the residential schools, psychiatric hospitals and institutions in Ireland, and looking at coercive confinement outside of the structure that we're used to talking about confinement, the prison, and looking at the role that that played in Ireland. So that was one of the modules that I enjoyed the most. And then I also studied punishment, prison and public policy, looking at the role of prison in our society, recidivism, when people are released, how likely are they to go back to prison, and looking at the potential abolition of prisons, just looking at the overall structure of it. So yeah, they were the modules that I studied, and there were more modules to choose from. I had quite a few people in my class who were studying the MSc as well, and they could take all of these modules except for the 2 law modules that I studied, the asylum and refugee law and the international human rights law. But there were other modules on whistleblowing, and they looked at policing in Ireland. And the other thing I really enjoyed about the module is that, or about the LLM in general, is that there were so many different people in our classes. So there were other people like me who'd come straight from their undergraduate degrees, but our undergraduate degrees were all different. Some people had studied sociology or social science. Also, another girl studied commerce and decided she completely wanted to change her path. So there was a lot of diversity in people coming from undergrad. And then there was also a lot of diversity otherwise, people who were taking the LLM for different reasons. A lot of international students, which was great because, you know, we could discuss what things are like in Ireland, and then they'd bring different perspectives from their countries and how things work there. And then there was also members of An Garda Síochána, and people who are professionals. So it was really great having that diversity as well. And another thing I really enjoyed actually was the diversity in assessment. So I came from my undergraduate in Cork, where it was very heavily exam focused at Christmas and then during the summer. And a lot of your marks are going on the exam, so it was quite an intense period of time, as I'm sure you know if you're studying an undergraduate as well at the moment. So what I really liked about the Masters as well is that the assessment was very varied. So it suited different people. it wasn't just this one very narrow view of assessment. So, for example, in asylum and refugee law and international human rights law, we were asked to write legal blogs, and that's actually really helped me in what I'm doing at the moment. I write a lot of law blogs for the firm I'm working for, so it was great getting that insight and that kind of practical experience. We also had presentations in white-collar crime and the prisons module, which was also great, and you get to work with other people. We did one on our own, one working with someone else. And then there was a lot of ongoing assessments, so like a reflective learning journal in advanced criminological theory. So every week you were kind of looking at the readings and, you know, writing up how you felt about things. And then there were a lot of assignments and assessments, take-home exams, or else an assignment that you're given, and you're given kind of more of an opportunity to go really in depth into the areas that you're interested in. So that was another reason that I chose to go to UCD, because you could just, you really got to choose with your modules how you wanted to be assessed as well and what suited you. So I actually never sat an exam in UCD. I was an invigilator at Christmas time even. So it was really great because I enjoy that ongoing assessment where you can really kind of stick your teeth into things. So then during the summer, you have a dissertation, which is also 30 credits. So each module is 10 credits during the 2 semesters. So it's 30 credits per semester. And then you also get help with your dissertation during your 2nd semester. So you have a dissertation module. They provide seminars that you can attend to look at different research methodologies, things like ethics in research. And then you also, in my dissertation module, you have to compose a poster of what your dissertation would be. And it's kind of early days, so you're still you're trying to get a grasp of what your final question will be. So you do a lot of exercise to kind of provoke this. And then you also have your research plan to submit. I think the poster was due maybe around February, and the research plan in maybe March. So it's kind of ongoing in the 2nd semester. But then the summer is when you really kind of go and write the thing. So yeah, it's the dissertation is difficult as well if you haven't done it before, but make sure to reach out to your supervisor, assign a supervisor in the 2nd semester, and it's your responsibility to go and meet them and ask for as much help as you want. If you're struggling with writing it or different aspects of it, just go talk to your supervisor. So yeah, then when I graduated then in 2019, and I decided that I wanted to come to Canada to qualify. So I kind of had decided when I was in Montana, I knew that I kind of wanted to come abroad again and do something like that. So I was researching it during my master's program, and then that's kind of the route I decided to take. Sorry, no, I'm probably running over time a bit. I should leave you and talk about Canada in the questions and answers, maybe.
Thanks, Claire. That was really interesting. A really good overview of the master's program, and you're such a recent graduate too. You know, you can really talk about what it's like right now for students here. Well, that's assuming whenever we're all back on campus, of course.
Yeah.
Now, our third speaker today is David Cochrane. David is going to talk to us about studying the LLM in intellectual property and information technology. David is the social strategy editor in the Irish Times newspaper, where he's worked for 9 years. He's worked in the digital area for most of his career, and in fact, I believe was the founder of politics.ie in 2003. Welcome, David.
Thanks very much. I'm feeling a lot older than I normally do after that extensive bio. I'm delighted to be back with UCD to be talking about the masters. It had a particularly positive impact on me personally, my personal development, but also in the work that I do now. I would see myself, or would have seen myself, as a kind of a non-traditional candidate for a number of reasons. The first was I didn't come from a law background, specifically in terms of academic study. I did do one law module as part of my undergrad, but it was really more kind of an introduction to law than anything else. But I've worked in the kind of online space for since 2003, and a lot of that would actually include online regulation and the online law area in areas such as defamation, copyright, and data protection. And really, there was one particular course that I was interested in doing, which was the online regulation module in UCD. And actually, my intention at the time was just to do a single course. But having actually met with the faculty and discussed the particular course, I was introduced to the LLM in intellectual property and information technology, which I did part-time over 2 years. The other thing that was untraditional about my approach was I was a January start. This was a particularly innovative thing for a university to do in terms of delivering a course, and it was hugely helpful for me. So in terms of the courses that I should say the modules that I took, I suppose the one that I enjoyed the most obviously was online regulation, and that looked particularly in the area of the kind of the foundation and creation of the internet, and how regulation has evolved alongside that. And it took a particularly contemporary focus with regards to how the law has developed in the United States, and how the law then has developed in Europe, and then from Europe in Ireland and in the UK. And in particular, that demonstrated the role of regulation in how companies are created, how companies are regulated, how companies can thrive, and the relationship between those companies and those that actually regulate them. Another course that another module that I took was digital investigations. The particular thing about digital investigations that I found hugely interesting was that it was jointly offered with the LLM in IP and IT, but also with the MSc in digital investigations and forensic computing. And that was particularly offered to law enforcement officials, and that was delivered through a combination of in-class and online for those internationally. So there were students there from Europol, Interpol, from the Garda Síochána, and from other law enforcement places around the world. And I suppose, digital investigations is particularly of relevance now, given the cyber hacking of the HSE systems. And that course particularly looked at the legal responsibilities on those who operate and manage computer systems, but also how law enforcement can actually use the law to investigate this kind of new area. So you're looking at things like the dark web, and you're looking at cybercrime, and you're looking at even elements of data protection in terms of the responsibilities of officials to make sure that their systems on their networks are secure. One of the other modules that I took more focus was data protection and privacy. And the thing about these other modules, and the consistent theme amongst all of those, is it's a very fast-paced, changing environment. In fact, I very much suspect that if I went back now to do the LLM, all the laws would be different. So actually, this data protection module was developed at the time that the GDPR was almost about to be approved, and so that was hugely interesting in terms of the different legislative systems in Europe and how they have influenced a single piece of law that's then been transposed internationally. Other modules that are available are patent law. Again, I think with particular focus on pharma. And again, that's hugely contemporary as well, given the demands and the kind of the calls on pharmaceutical companies to make their vaccines IP available for creation, and then trademark law and copyright law as well. And I found copyright law particularly rewarding in terms of the different ways that content can actually be used legally and sometimes illegally. In terms of the optional modules that I took media regulation, no surprise, given my background in the Irish Times. And that was more of a kind of a traditional a course that looked at media regulation in Ireland and the historical perspectives and why we are in the position we are now in terms of the position of media and the press regulator, the broadcasting regulator, and also the various laws around the media and how the media are regulated. And another module that I took was corporate governance. And I think that gave me a particularly good foundation in understanding how companies act as individuals, how they have kind of a personality in themselves, and they're regulated, and their legal and their ethical responsibilities with regards to their customers and to their staff. In terms of assessment, kind of a broad mix of assessment means a lot of continuous assessment, which, essays that were, hugely important. I think I only took one exam during the entire 2 years, and that was for media law. One thing that I enjoyed in particular were the take-home exams. So you would get an exam on a title on a Friday morning, and you would have pretty much the whole weekend to work on it. And that really set a high bar for all of the students to make sure that, it's open book, and you have to submit a pretty good high quality piece of work. And then in terms of my dissertation, this is one that I was able to bring together all of the modules that I had done across the LLM, and also able to do a particular focus on something that I was actually interested in. So my dissertation was on the regulation of content on social media networks. So I took a look at how social media operates, the requirements on the social media networks, their role in terms of policy and trying to ensure that they're not regulated externally by national governments or European governments, and that they're able to actually reassure both their users and regulators that they are able to look after their own areas. And obviously, there's lots of debates ongoing about Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and whether those are actually safe networks in terms of your data protection, in terms of your safety, and obviously the use of them by minors. The dissertation was hugely challenging. It was a very large body of work, but I cannot speak highly enough of the support from the entire faculty, and particularly my supervisor, Colin Scott, in assisting me in understanding what my dissertation was. What was my question? What was the question I wanted to look at, and how was I going to answer it? So in terms of other people that were doing the course, obviously there were graduates who had come straight from other law undergrads in UCD and elsewhere. Obviously, there were people in law enforcement for some of the classes, modules, I should say, as well. There were barristers who wanted to specialize in copyright, intellectual property, defamation, GDPR, obviously, which was emerging, and solicitors as well that wanted to focus on that particular area. There were also people working for Facebook, for Google, or people who are now working for Facebook and Google. I mean, there's a huge tech sector in Dublin, and they're screaming out for people who are hugely experienced in this area. And in terms of what it's done for me, I started off as the communities editor of the Irish Times 9 years ago, and my role was to help the Irish Times understand the role of social media for a newspaper. My role has changed a couple of times. In particular, following my graduation from the Masters, I became the editorial lead for making sure that we were GDPR compliant. I currently work quite a bit in the area of defamation. So if we get defamation complaints that come in around online comments on social media or anything that's been published. I also look, obviously, particularly with the role of social media. So I'm now the group lead. So the Irish Times is now a wider group. It's the largest Indigenous publisher in the country, with the Irish Times, the Examiner, and some radio stations, and some local papers as well. So I help guide them to understand the role of social media and how it is regulated and how they can operate from within that.
Thank you so much, David. That was really interesting, and a great little plug there for the Irish Times, where I in my career as well. Now I have, I'm going to call on all of the panel to turn on their cameras and their mics, because we have a series of questions. I mentioned Niamh McCabe is joining us as well. Hi, Niamh. And my first question is actually for Niamh. Niamh is the graduate program manager. So she's very good on the technical detail. So somebody emailed me in advance to ask, how do I select modules for an LLM General, and when can I do so for the autumn 2021?
Well, the dates for registration for the next academic year have not been finalised yet, but normally it would be in mid-August, and you would register yourself on your own student record. It's UCD Connect or UCD SysWeb, SISWeb. If you've been offered a place on the programme, you'll receive notification from the school, the law school, by early August as to the dates and the process. And you'll also get an email from UCD Registry.
Great, thanks, Niamh. Now, there's a question, as I expected there would be, for Claire about Canada. So the question is, do you have to go to a Canadian law school to qualify?
So how it works in Canada is you do your undergraduate and then you do law school as a graduate program, and then you go on to the qualification process. But as someone with a foreign qualification, you can sit these exams called the NCA exams to basically transfer your qualification from Ireland to the equivalent of a JD, which is the graduate law school degree in Canada. So I had to sit 5 exams. You're assessed differently. I think actually having the LLM allowed me to take the minimum number of exams possible. So you sit 5 exams in core Canadian law. There's self-study, open book, and you can sit them remotely now because of COVID. So you can sit them in Ireland if you like. So then once you pass those exams, then you're recognised as having the equivalent of a JD in Canada. And then the qualification process, it's different in each province, but here in Ontario, where Toronto is, you have to sit the barrister exams, and then you have to article for 10 months. So I started articling last October and then set the bar exams in March. And then another thing is that you sit barrister exams and solicitor exams. They're 2 weeks apart. So over here, you don't have the option to pursue the solicitor path or the barrister path. You have to take both, and then you qualify as both.
Thanks, Claire. That's really interesting. And thanks again for joining us at, I think it's about 7 o'clock in the morning there. So
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and for once it's sunnier in Dublin than it is in Toronto.
I know. I wish I was home today.
Now, my next question is about the in relation to the MCL, and it's for Andrew then, obviously. So somebody's asking, how many hours of teaching lectures per week are there with the MCL, and how many hours of independent study is advised?
Yeah, that's one that probably the module pages on UCD will actually be able to advise better, because it's been a couple of years. But I mean, it's a full week. It is a kind of thing that that if you're thinking of doing the MCL, it doesn't mean that you can't take any other jobs on. You can work weekends, you can work evenings, but it is an endeavor. But if you check actually on the UCD website at the MCL modules, it will say the number of hours, contact hours, and independent study hours for each lecture or for each module. So all I can really tell you is that it is intensive.
Una, I can just answer part of that question actually. So normally it's around 12 hours per week of lecture time for the MCL. And then in addition, they have seminars, 4 2-hour seminars per trimester. So that doesn't include the independent learning time.
That's great. Thanks, Niamh. Yeah. Okay, and then I have a question for David in relation to the opportunities. Do you think the IP and IT LLM would be suitable for somebody maybe thinking of pursuing a career in Europe?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the sources for most of the laws in information technology and intellectual property, they're all sourced from the European Union and the European Parliament. So absolutely, so there's similar laws across the entire European Union. So there are people from the course, I think, that have taken a job working for Facebook in Dublin, and then moved from Facebook in Dublin to Facebook in Brussels, and then Facebook in London, and they're working within the same legislative framework in all of them.
Great, thanks, David. I have another question for Niamh too about start dates. I think it was in the news in Ireland this morning. It was declared that the Leaving Cert results aren't coming out till early September, and that's obviously going to affect the intake. So someone's asking, when does the term start, and will it be delayed by the Leaving Certs?
So as far as I checked the system this morning, actually, just to be sure, but it according to registry, term will start in September on the 13th, so Monday, 13th of September.
Great. And then somebody's asking about face-to-face. Will teaching be online or face-to-face then as well?
Certainly the plan at the moment, as we understand it, is that for all graduate lectures, it will be face-to-face. We're waiting on, I suppose, 100% confirmation from government guidelines that we can go ahead with that type of teaching. But because graduate classes are reasonably small, anything from 20 to 40, and maybe a little bit above that, it'll be easier for us to provide face-to-face teaching for those classes. So as soon as we know, we'll be able to tell students that in August.
Great, thanks, Niamh. Now we're getting a few questions which are quite specific. So if we don't get a chance to today, I would suggest that you email us on lawpostgraduate@ucd.ie, and we'll get back to you with an answer for any of your specific questions about, I know somebody's asking about doing English test scores and this, so we can get back with answers, or we can direct you to people who can give you the correct answers to all of those. So David, then somebody has a question in relation to part-time versus full-time, and asking, did you manage to keep, you were working full-time while you were doing it part-time? How challenging was that?
It certainly wasn't as challenging as I was anticipating, to be absolutely honest. So I had a fully supportive employer that was quite keen for me to do the LLM, particularly on the basis of the benefits that they would get from the knowledge that I would gain. I think in terms of the timetabling, I think I was probably on campus for the modules, I think one afternoon a week and one morning a week, and that covered 4 modules over 2 semesters. So that's really what I did. But I suppose I did have the benefit of only being 15 minutes away on the bus, and given the transport connections that UCD has, I was able to kind of get up from my desk in the newsroom and be in a lecture in half an hour.
Great, thanks, David. Okay, I think we've pretty well answered all of the questions that I had gotten in advance. And as I said, there are some specific questions which people are typing in. And please do, if we don't get a chance to answer your question now, please do email us on lawpostgraduate@ucd.ie. You'll also find information on our website, ucd.ie/law, on our YouTube channel. As I said, we will be posting this on YouTube if you want to go back and listen to everybody again. It will be on our YouTube channel next week. But we also have webinars from last year, and we have various lecturers speaking about the different programs. So I would suggest, if you're still making your decision, if you're still trying to decide, do all of that research, download the prospectus, watch the videos, and then email us with any questions that you might have. So I just wanted to finish them and thank our guest speakers, which I'm absolutely delighted. I found this really interesting myself, and somebody has complimented, said really insightful presentation there, which is very, very nice. Thank you. So thank you all. Thank you, Andrew, Claire all the way from Toronto, and David from Dublin, I presume, yeah, and Niamh, of course. Then thank you for all of your answers as well. So I just would like to finish up then, and as I said, if you want to view this video, it will be on our YouTube channel, which you'll find very easily on YouTube. So it'll be there next week. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.